Yes, certainly.
Good evening, friends and colleagues at Sri Chitra and elsewhere. I'm Mala Ramanathan, Professor at Achutha Center in Sri Chitra, and I organize a SAMVAAD lecture series. I'm standing in for our usual MC, Professor Ishwar, who is having some other professional preoccupations. We have with us Dr. Krishna Kumar, the pediatric cardiologist from Amrita Institute for Medical Sciences, Kochi. It is an honor to have him as the SAMVAAD speaker for the day. Dr. Krishna Kumar developed and now leads the pediatric heart program at AIIMS Kochi. When given the choice of topic, he chose to talk about why and how we should value our teachers and mentors, actually surprising me with his choice. But in a rapidly changing world where growth and technology is rapidly outrunning growth skills to use it, it is an important issue at the intersection of cultural values and technology growth. We could not have had a better person to talk about this than the one who has mentored and inspired so many young medical professionals the world over. We also need to situate the SAMVAAD lecture series initiated during the difficult times of the pandemic and the one which continues to enlighten those of us at the Sri Chitra fraternity. Now, to talk about the SAMVAAD SCT-IMST's lecture series, let me hand you over to the Deputy Director and Professor, Department of Anesthesiology, Dr. Manikantan. Dr. Manikantan.
Good evening, one and all. It's a proud privilege to introduce our international lecture series, SAMVAAD, which was started by Dr. Mala Ramanathan, thanks to the director's initiative, Dr. Sanjay Bihari. We have been continuing, and this is the 10th of this series. The SAMVAAD is meant to bring stalwarts in the various fields of human endeavor to deliver talks to young researchers and motivate them. The aim is to inspire interdisciplinary conversations that can mold and build innovations. This is the 10th of series that was initiated initially on June 24th, 2022, with the inaugural talk by an eminent neurosurgeon, former editor of Indian Journal of Medical Ethics, Professor Sunil Pandya. We have had many scientists, medical professionals, public health practitioners, eminent in their various spheres, exploring not only the science, other aspects related to work, careers, and other aspects of life. It has been useful and served as an inspiration to our SCT-MST community. Many alumni join and they watch the videos which are being streamed in the YouTube. Each of the speakers have brought us various experiences in the area of their expertise, tempered by their ability to convert their passion into a multidisciplinary audience that the SCT-MST represents. This is the 10th of the series, and to enlighten us, we have had services of Dr. Krishna Kumar, a distinguished pediatric cardiologist from AIIMS Ernakulam. We are honored to have him to deliver this SAMVAAD lecture. Before we get into the lecture and introduction by Dr. Hari Krishnan, I would like to make a thin line of distinguish between what is a teacher, a mentor, and coach. Many of us may not be really knowing what they are used interchangeably. A teacher typically adds more knowledge to the topic that you are studying than what you do. A mentor is a great visionary of what you are trying to achieve to guide you to the future, whereas the coach is a trainer or instructor whose aim is to improve someone's performance who are already prepared for something. So there is a thin line of difference between each of them. They approach the problem in the different ways. Ultimately, they aim to achieve you in greater in your life. With this brief introduction, I would like to request Dr. Hari Krishnan to introduce the speaker.
Good evening, friends, ladies and gentlemen. I am very happy and privileged to present before you Dr. R. Krishna Kumar, or KK as he is called and known, who is currently the professor and head of the department of pediatric cardiology at AIIMS Kochi. When Mala Madam asked me to do the introduction, then I said I will be extremely happy to do this honor because I know him. He is a good friend of mine, and whenever there is an academic difficulty, we always approach him. KK did his MD and DM from AIIMS New Delhi and later did the fellowship in pediatric cardiology at the prestigious Harvard Medical School, Boston. He came back deciding not to stay back in the US and became a faculty at AIIMS Delhi, from where he shifted to Amrita Institute, Kochi in 1998. There he started his illustrious career where he developed pediatric cardiological interventional procedures. In the late 1990s, we all know that the pediatric intervention program was in its infancy, especially in India. He is the one who masterminded the development of various protocols suited to Indian setup. Worth mentioning is the cost-effective PDA coil closure with the tying with surgical sutures, which we all emulated, and the AST device closure under transesophageal echocardiographic guidance. In addition to his clinical interest in pediatric cardiology, his research interest is in rheumatic heart disease. He did the study which showed the community prevalence of in Kerala is very low compared to other regions, and he was rightly awarded the Kerala Hridaya Puraskaram for the efforts in rheumatic heart disease. And he is the co-chair of the World Heart Federation Rheumatic Heart Disease Program since 2016. My association with the KK started in 2009 when we were associated with the PVRI, or the Pulmonary Vascular Research Institute, which is an association which focuses on the pulmonary vascular disease. He was a co-chair of the Southeast Asia region. During his tenure, we started many research programs and also started the journal Pulmonary Circulation, which is now a journal of high impact. He's an excellent teacher and wants the students and mentees to reach the highest standards. He's always worried about the deterioration of standards in medical teaching, mostly the neglect of clinical medicine. He has started a few online programs in that direction, which are unique and of high standards, aiming at cardiology trainees and fellows. He has started many core programs in the country, which has benefited a lot of people and also trainees from abroad. Examples are the fellowship program in pediatric cardiology, the FNP program under the national board, which he has initiated and developed the program, and also the DM pediatric cardiology program in the country. He has trained a lot of pediatric cardiologists from India, neighboring countries. Many of them are in teaching hospitals and have started their own programs. He is a great mentor, and many of his mentees have become global leaders in many fields like fetal echocardiography, cardiac imaging, etc. He has many high-impact publications in top journals, and he was part of many guideline committees and formulated guidelines which are suited to low middle-income countries. He has edited 4 textbooks. Out of them, I consider the Tandon's textbook of cardiology, which is dedicated to his teacher and mentor, Dr. Raj Tandon, who was in AIIMS, Delhi. So I think his talk will be also related to that talk. He had received many awards, starting from the best postgraduate from AIIMS. Starting from that, he has got many awards, the BMG Award for Quality Improvement and the prestigious Sitaram Jaipuri Award. The money he received was given to the poor kids for treatment with heart disease. I'm sure I have left out many of his achievements and accolades he had received. Due to the limited time I'm restricting here. I'm very happy to present Professor R. Krishna Kumar, the master clinician, master teacher, great mentor, and above all, are a remarkable human being. Over to you, my dear friend KK.
Well, Dr. Mala, am I next on to speak, or should I wait for some? Is there somebody else to speak?
No, you can start.
Okay, I'll start. Well, Hari.
Will you please start, sir? This is your turn.
Yeah. Well, Hari, that's one of the most overwhelming introductions I've ever received, and I'm humbled, of course. And coming from you, of course, it's even makes it even more special. Again, my sincerest thanks for this opportunity, and truly honored and privileged, and actually humbled to be invited. This is very special. I respect Sri Chitra as an institution enormously, and I'll share the reasons why I do that. So again, most privileged to be part of this SAMVAAD series. I will start sharing my slides now, and one second. Dr. Mala, your fears may have come true.
Sir, it will work. And I have my colleague, Mr. Suresh, who will talk us through any glitch.
Okay. So I'm trying to share, and now it's not letting me share for some reason. Yeah, I think I can share now. Got it. So I'm fine. I think you can see my slides. Can you see my slides?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So I'm
perfect,
ready now.
Sir.
Thank you.
Perfect.
So I chose this topic because I think that is very accurately stated by Dr. Hari Krishnan, that I'm passionate about this issue, about the fact that there is a decline in teaching standards in medicine, not just in medicine, perhaps I suspect in many other endeavors as well. And I also apologize for uh, blurring the distinction between teachers and mentors. And that's how it happened in my life. My teachers were also my mentors. They knew so much more than me. So they imparted all the knowledge, but at the same time, they guided my career, and have had a lifelong association with them. So this, I thought I'll start with this quote. Uh, the teacher influences eternity. You can never tell where the influence stops. So this statement I have borrowed from Dr. Shyam Sundar Kothari, whom I again deeply admire, who's also was associated with this Sri Chitra Institute for some time. Incidentally, the word doctor is derived from the Latin word docere, which means to teach. So in some ways, we are also teachers as doctors, because we guide and instruct. But coming back to this particular quote, I think you'll relate to it, especially when you talk about great institutions, because the legacy of these great institutions is long lasting. It lasts from, it gets transmitted from generation to generation, and I don't know if you realize what a phenomenal impact Sri Chitra as an institution has had across the country, with its trainees who have then gone on to transmit that legacy and uphold those values. I just, not long ago was Guru Purnima or Teachers Day, and we got all these wonderful messages from our students that obviously make me feel very happy and make me feel all my efforts are worthwhile. But I think we have this tradition in our country, which ironically is being eroded in our own institutions and in our own various places where we practice medicine. While we hold the Guru in the highest regard, I'm not sure if we are doing enough to uphold those values. I'll start by giving some personal reflections on great teachers and mentors. And one of the reasons why I think the way I do is because I've been remarkably fortunate to have been guided and mentored by some exceptional people. I have to start with Dr. Tandon, as all of you um, must be aware. And as Dr. Hari Krishnan mentioned, Dr. Tandon had a profound impact on my on almost anything that I did, and the reason why I chose pediatric cardiology was entirely because of him. The reason why I thought I'll dwell upon him is only because he imbibed, he had those values, he had those attributes that are so remarkable, so special, and so universal. When he passed away, Dr. Kothari and I sat together and wrote his obituary. And I picked on 6 were penned by Dr. Kothari, of course, a few by me, but he was remarkable. His influence went well beyond everything. And any student who came in contact with him remembers Dr. Tandon for a lifetime. His legacy was felt in Sri Chitra. I mean, his trainees subsequently came over. Dr. Raghavan Subramaniam is an example of a trainee who was trained by Dr. Tandon, and then he came to Chitra, and then, of course, left his impact thereafter. So that's how his values. So we have several generations of students of Dr. Tandon that are within this country. Remarkably, he was just not a strict disciplinarian. I mean, this is one thing that he taught me, and I haven't learned it fully. He did not really need to be very strict. He just managed to inspire without being obnoxious at any point. He didn't actually even induce a sense of fear in anybody. He just managed to get the best without doing any of that. He, of course, the one thing that I have to remember from Dr. Tandon was his standards of academic honesty. He really would not tolerate any level of dishonesty with anything that you did in medicine, particularly research. He set really very high standards, and he he would be very upset about any signs of academic dishonesty in research. So that to me was very striking, and that's one of those lessons I imbibed from him. The one thing that he took great pains was to never humiliate a student. In fact, he said never humiliate a student in public, but to be honest, he never did it in private as well. And of course, his commitment to teaching was unparalleled. I have seen him not respond to calls from the Prime Minister's office while he was teaching. He would say that he would dismiss it, saying he's busy. Of course, after all this was this humility, which was genuine, modest. His modesty was actually absolutely from the very core. There was not a iota of pretense about that honesty. So all this left. So it's his being. It's not just how much he knew and what he could teach, but who he was that left that impact on me. So the other extraordinary woman who has had an impact on me is Professor Neuberger. What's more remarkable about Dr. Neuberger was her interest in lifelong mentorship. In the sense, she really has maintained a lifelong interest in my career. 30 years after I have trained with her, and I spent just 2 years at Children's Boston, and she does that to every single trainee that trained under her. And again, that deepest sincerity leaves its own impact. Here's another example of a mentor. Now, you may call some mentors could be tormentors. Dr. Stan Perry, who taught me how to catheterize, was often classified as a tormentor. But I see him more like Bodhidharma. And if you know about Bodhidharma, who took Buddhism to the East, from India to China, he was known as a very difficult, very vicious mentor who would impart a lot of pain in order to make his student learn. And that's another style of mentorship. And I can tell you, it's even that is a remarkable form of mentorship, because it has left Dr. Perry's training that I received from him in the cath lab, maybe 2 months of it, has left such a lifelong impact. I could innovate and think my way through any difficult situation because he put me through a certain level of rigor that is very hard to do without being unpleasant. So it's not always that you have one style of mentorship. Nothing is perfect. You need to understand the intent behind a teacher. So this was why I found was remarkable. And of course, there were teachers in my MBBS days who were tremendous in their inspiration. I'm just giving you two examples, and I'm sure every doctor will remember one or two teachers or more teachers in their in their undergraduation days, and who have left an impact from their enthusiasm, from their genuine kindness. The thing that I wanted to come to is that great institutions, I have to say, is equivalent to great teachers. It's not the buildings, it's not the it's not the infrastructure, it's not the access to technology, but it's the people. It's teachers who come together in that institution who leave an impact. And I trained in Boston Children's. I'm just giving you an example of some exceptional people, all great leaders in their own field. Some of the names you can see: Dr. Locke right here in the middle was the father of cardiac catheterization, Dr. Stella and Richard Van Praag, Dr. Neuberger, Dr. Katalgiv, and the list goes on. In each area, they were masters, and they were nurtured. What was striking to me is that Harvard, or many institutions in the West, that have this tradition of long-lasting legacy of excellence. Now, these are 300 years of excellence. They just don't lose their edge at any time because they nurture the people. They are people-focused, and they always make sure that they invest in nurturing, retaining the right kind of talent, the leadership. They invest in the leadership, and they go to any lengths to nurture this process. Something that I think we have failed in some ways in India, or our systems do not allow for some reason. I trained at All India Institute. One of the things that struck the people at Boston was they first asked me where I was trained, because I was trained in a very good institution as well. And we had a fantastic department of exceptional teachers. Dr. Srivastav, Dr. Manchanda, Dr. Kaul, Dr. Srinath Reddy, all legends of their times. They all had a big impact on my understanding of cardiology, and really ignited a lot of the fire that followed. I have to confess that I joined All India Institute a bit by accident. This is a picture I wanted to show you of um the people I met when I came to Sri Chitra to join the DM. I was selected for the DM program in Sri Chitra in 1989. And these were the people I encountered at that time. And I had a very hard time in actually saying no to Sri Chitra. I joined All India Institute at that time, and incidentally, the reason I joined was because there was no emergency, there was no acute care in Sri Chitra at that time, and I was told that that would be a big deficiency in your training, so you should be at a place where there is a lot of acute care and a lot of sick patients. But the people I encountered left a remarkable impression on me from that very day. The day I was actually, when I had to participate in my selection. So Dr. Subramaniam, Dr. Venkatachalam, Dr. Taragan, Dr. Ramakrishna Pillai, and Dr. KG Balakrishna, who incidentally was my DM examiner. And of course, when the final interview happened with Professor Valiathan, who, again, even that brief encounter left such a remarkable impact, I sort of understood why it is so important to have great institutions for the country, and why is it for great institutions to have great teachers. So what's a good teacher in medicine? Who is a good teacher? I'm just giving medicine because that's what I'm familiar with, but I'm sure it applies in some ways in other fields as well. I think, firstly, you should be enthusiastic. You should have the spirit of learning. And I think this is, if a teacher is cynical and is not enthusiastic, is not excited about new information, that dampens the enthusiasm of the student. Of course, knowledge is necessary. The teacher should be well read and also should be willing to change, because everything changes in medicine. Even their strongest views, they should be willing to change. And of course, I see a remarkable example in Professor Taragan, who is just remarkably well read and up to date, as of today. So that is something that is perhaps necessary. Otherwise, you can't command the respect of your student. And you must be genuinely interested in the lifelong development of your student, way beyond your period of encounter as well, and must enjoy it. So that joy should be infectious. And that I saw in Dr. Tandon was a clear example. And the impact must be felt many years after the student is gone. I'm sure you feel that for some of the great teachers that have been there. Must attract and then challenge the student. And something that is very important, I think the challenge is also important, because not everything can be, everything can be taught by just one way passage of information. A certain challenge will get the student to think, and that's very important. I found that with Dr. Stan Perry, who taught me how to catheterize. Must respect the student. Now, that's very essential. Not everybody does that, and that's something that we need to change. I think that's a culture that is changing, but very slowly. Patience, I saw that with Dr. Tandon, in abundance. Must be prepared for disappointment. So you can have students who let you down, who may betray you. But that's life. That happens, and that happens with all of us. And then must listen. Sometimes we don't listen to our students. And that's also something that is very hierarchical in the way we are structured with our institutions. We really don't look at it as a two-way process, and that's also needs to change. And then if you find that the student wants to do something else, you can't stand in the way of the student's learning. So this level of detachment also should be there. So this is all from Dr. Willis Hurst, who wrote the Hurst textbook of cardiology. And I cannot think of a more complete way of describing a good teacher. And all of us must aspire, and I try, of course. I know that I fall way behind all these 11 points that are listed so beautifully here. I show this picture because, and I'll tell you why. Medicine is still an art, and arts are best learned in the physical presence of the master. So what I'm showing you is Ali Akbar Khan and Ravi Shankar learning from Baba Alauddin Khan. And they spent 7 to 10 years under the mentorship. And that was so transformative in making them the greatest artists of the century. That's sort of true for medicine as well. And that's because a lot of lessons are learned in the spontaneity of the movement. I know we are sitting in a virtual session right now. I'm not saying that the virtual sessions have to be abandoned and only physical sessions matter, but the physical presence of working with your mentor within the same confines of the room and actually looking at your mentor all the time and having these exchanges and is something that cannot be replaced, because there are so many fine tunings, there are so many subtle things that happen through infinite iterations that really sharpen you. It's like polishing a rough diamond, a rough stone into a diamond. And some of the great human virtues really cannot be separated from the professional experience. So there's something about this physical presence of your teacher that makes a big difference. So I think that's something we have to recognize. So if you find a great teacher and if you're able to spend time in the presence of him or her, that's a remarkable blessing. So here's a statement that I really liked, which said that education doesn't occur in a vacuum. Indeed, much of what is learned lies outside the formal curriculum. There is a hidden curriculum, really, that is, you watch how they behave. It's the interactions, the going back and forth. All that forms a part of a culture, and it's very powerful in the way you get shaped. If your institution has a tradition where the seniors are actually rude to patients or are indifferent, that will rub through. So I think this hidden curriculum is something which is really very important, and it may be completely at crossroads with what is being taught in the classroom. The classrooms maybe having a situation where the professor says that you have to behave in a certain way but doesn't actually do that. That's really where it completely fails. So it's very important to recognize this hidden curriculum that exists. For again, the onus then comes on us to set an example as teachers. But it's all started to change over times, and we need to recognize what has changed over times. There is definitely, I think you're blessed and fortunate in a place like Sri Chitra, and to some extent in Amrita as well, that we are living in an institution that's not driven entirely by profits. So there is now a tendency to monetize everything. So some of the great teachers, for example, who have chosen to work in a private practice environment may not have the time, because time is exceedingly equivalent to money. This is actually both a blessing and a curse. That is the access to information. It's a blessing because you can at the drop of the hat access anything. It's a curse because it's just because you can access everything, you really don't bother to understand and read anything thoroughly, and find out for yourself. So because at any time you can refer. So this has become a bit of a problem these days, because the ease with which you can access in digital information has perhaps come in the way of deep reading and deep learning. And clearly all of us have a problem when it comes to distractions these days. We are all distracted with the mobile technology. We've become severely distracted, and seriously, there is, I think, a decline in our attention spans. So why blame our students? And there's also tremendous, it's not just litigious environments, but you're very conscious of the student, of the patient's what to say, sentiments really these days, and it becomes really difficult to teach medicine the way it used to be taught long ago. So we need to find a way where it can be taught while being highly respectful to patients. And that's a bit of a challenge. It's not always easy, especially when you are trying to teach a large number of students. So how do we measure the impact of an inspiring teacher by using today's metrics? What is it that really matters today? The problem is, many of the most important attributes cannot be counted, cannot be measured, cannot be. So it's all like subjective, and that makes it very difficult for teachers to be rewarded. In situation, we have I think, quite honestly, we have seriously failed to find a way to consistently value our teachers. We really haven't done that in most institutions. Very few institutions have a best teacher award, or or some ways of recognizing just the fact that somebody has spent a lot of time teaching their students. That doesn't seem to be there in most places. So that's a very serious problem, because it's not just a question of giving rewards or giving awards, but finding a way to recognize or value that. There is really no system for student feedback. It's all word of mouth, and it's it's very unstructured, and it doesn't matter. There is promotions and rewards in almost every single institutions are in serious disconnect with actual teaching skills. If you look deeply, not a single medical college in this country will actually promote you purely on basis of teaching skills. And these matter. If you are a career person, these actually matter. So those who go the extra mile are just not rewarded. Their rewards are in what they do, and it's a very deep personal reward, which motivates them. But there are no external rewards. And so teaching amounts to personal sacrifice in many ways. The way depends on how you look at it. But if you look at it in a very objective way, it seems to amount to a lot of personal sacrifice. So that's the situation in India, and nobody's thought about it. And that's one of the reasons why I chose to talk about this today. So essentially, we go unheralded, unrecognized, unrewarded. And career advancements are dictated merely by publicity, publications, mere seniority. You just have to exist and you can get promoted. And contacts and networking in some places, I'm sure they matter in some places more than the others, but not in what the students think of you, what legacy you've left behind, and all what I've spoken about. Just gave you an example, a case in point of the BC Roy Award. Incidentally, Dr. Tandon never received the BC Roy Award, and I think that's like the greatest. It's a really sad situation. Many great teachers that I know, and I'm sure you also know. But that is because you have to do this to get the BC Roy Award. You have to, apply it in this fashion, and you need to have all these copies that are placed, and there's no way of figuring out who really has made an impact as a teacher. As a result, a lot of people have received the BC Roy Award and they've never been a medical teacher in their lives, because they have lobbied, they've networked, and they found their way, and they can put it in their CV. And that's very disturbing. So the Western framework, there is one. If you go to most Western institutions, they do have a framework. And I don't know how much of that actually translates. There is, in fact, a great deal of frustration even in Western institutions, but there is definitely a system where there is a structured student feedback. I remember having had to give it when I was a student there. And I'm not sure how it's collected, collated, and compiled, but it does matter because I was given feedback on subsequently when I became a teacher as well, and how much of that is weighted into that and how much of it translates. But certainly it's not something that's completely ignored, and there are lots of best teacher awards and opportunities at resident levels. There are many ways in which it is subtly recognized and encouraged and nurtured. So the trouble in India is that now we are having to mass produce doctors in the face of a system that does not seem to value its teachers. We have a sad situation. We are all short of doctors at every level, and we are at the same time, we have no way of recognizing who the good teachers are. So that is translating into a very serious and a rapid decline in clinical standards. I don't know if that's something that is perceived in an institution of excellence like Sri Chitra, but out here I do see that. There is what's bothering me most is the decline in curiosity. The student doesn't ask questions. There is no inquisitiveness, and part of it is because of the NEET exam that sort of reduce every situation to a multiple choice question. There is also a serious deterioration of clinical skills with every generation. I mean, I may be lamenting something which you may say that it's just an old man ranting, but it's not true. We have definitely a decline, and there is of course a great deal of dependence on lab investigation. But what's really bothersome at a very fundamental level is there is no discriminative or critical thinking, where you put everything in the context of a clinical presentation and carefully make a decision on what needs to be done for the patient. So this, to me, is the crisis of modern medicine, and many of us senior doctors quite shudder to look at the day when we'll be sick, ill as really old people, and we don't know who's going to look after us. So there is a situation that we need to change. I don't know if this is being talked about, but I thought I should be very forthright in talking about it. So we need a national debate and awakening and how we should develop and nurture value teachers in medicine in India. This needs to happen, not just in medicine, perhaps in other endeavors as well, but it needs to happen in multiple forums. It needs to happen in societies, but it needs to happen within institutions. And that change needs to happen. We need some system for student feedback. But the way I look at it is that, the student should really not just find out what they have learned from the teacher, but how that has helped them become a better doctor or a better, how has it been transformative. And we need to, by designing these questions, we make everybody think about it. So can we not, I'm just thinking about it, maybe not, maybe it's just an idea that I'm suggesting, that an institute award based on faculty based feedback on student feedback, and that can actually bring about some changes. At least it makes you conscious of who you are and how you conduct yourself. The other thing is that things have changed in the 21st century. It's not the same kind of teaching that we have to do anymore. We have to teach many aspects to healthcare professionals. The most important thing that we need to teach is how to work in interdisciplinary teams. In my own case, I run a pediatric heart program, and I have to teach people how to work with the surgeons, with the anesthetists, with the nurses, with the other staff. And so that's a very important aspect of medicine that has changed. Also, our treatment has to be patient centered, and it's very important, particularly these days. Employing evidence-based practice, it's not eminence-based anymore, it's evidence-based. And then quality improvement. How do you apply quality improvement to what you do? And how do you utilize informatics? And more importantly, the most important thing that matters in India is to how to look at your specialty through a public health lens, something that's not taught in India. And it's really, really important. Otherwise, your medicine becomes seriously in disconnect with their society, especially as you go higher and higher in tertiary care. You become disconnected with societal priorities. Now, that is something that we really have to teach, inculcate within our students. And we need to adapt as teachers because of that. We also need to be taught how to teach. And that is something that MCI started to do very seriously, National Medical Council. And there is training in pedagogy now that all of us are being asked to undergo. But what's necessary also is to integrate research. And I think the best teachers are also very thoughtful researchers. So that's another area that we need to find a way to blend into this whole process. And we as senior teachers cannot just impose our values and perception on the next generation. It's all changed these days. We need to come together and discuss, not just lament about, oh, it used to be so good in those days. We need to really adapt to the changing times. There is really a remarkable change that has happened, and the disconnect between us and our students is even more than ever before. So we need to understand their perceptions, their aspirations, their frustrations, and really find out solutions within that framework. Of course, we need very good advocacy, and we really have to find a way to talk to National Medical Council on implementing a student evaluation framework, linking faculty promotion to the results of the evaluation, and linking university ratings to very robust student-based faculty evaluation process. I don't think that's happening. It's happening, but it's very notional. Advocacy targets should be our peers, medical students, medical societies, governing council of institutions, universities, regulatory agencies, government, very important, and ministries. So lots of people should be told now that things are very important it's really important to nurture teachers, to develop teachers, to recognize teachers, and to value teachers. So this is something that we need. The whole process of teaching and imparting skills in medicine needs to be brought into the consciousness of everybody. rewards and awards should be a systematic process, not the arbitrary whims of a poorly constituted selection committee. That's what happens. Recognition should be at all levels, across multiple specialities, and really linked to promotions. And the careers should be secure. If there's insecurity, then it leads to a lot of unacceptable consequences. It's just an example of what I've been doing, but I've been greatly benefited by the enthusiasm of Dr. Taragan, Dr. Subramaniam, many people, ex-Chitra and ex-All India Institute teachers who've come together on this monthly session that Hari Krishnan was talking about. And it's been such an enjoyable process in trying to get them all together and even well beyond their retirement years, have them impart their wisdom to the current generation of students. So maybe this is just one of the things that I have tried, and it's maybe having a small impact, but definitely it has been a very enjoyable process. So my parting thoughts are that teachers are most critical to institution building and sustaining excellence. And our failure to value good teachers is perhaps at the core of the crisis of modern medicine, particularly in our country. And we need a national debate and collective efforts and sustained advocacy towards addressing this, what I think is the most important issue which uh, confronts us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Krishna Kumar. It was very wonderful listening to you. And I was a part of the academic curriculum, as you were mentioning about the student feedback. Actually, we have a e-portfolio, and last 2 years we have been having the student feedback. Previously, we used to ask at the end of the DEM program. Now, 6 monthly, the students have to compulsorily they have to fill the forms. It is an online program. Every 6 months they have to fill the program, means fill the feedback about the various teaching activities, clinical, academic activity, training, and including the teachers, and they have to give their opinion if they want to add a few more topics or you want to get repeated. And also that we have the integrated PhD program also now being started. We are all the more we are more focused on research and interdisciplinary training. So it was very wonderful listening to you. One thing I want to ask you, because the students stay for a very short time, the residents. So how do you differentiate whom should be the teacher, whom should be mentor? Because mentor is the one who actually changes the really whole scenario. Suppose is this more common like in field like surgery as interventional, where interventions are much more happening. So some of the resident may be interested in something like pediatric, or some may be more interested in electrophysiology, like where really actually mentorship should be on this one. So how do we separate it out from the resident training? So teaching, generally we have a common teaching program for all the students, but there are some persons may be slightly more interested in something, learning something more interested. How do we get it done in the kind of, we have a very strict compartmentalization that they have to undergo this kind of thing, this many hours in classroom, this many hours in ICU, this many in the wards, like this. So how do we incorporate this kind of cult in our new system education policy?
So I think there is within the scope of the 3 years of, let's say, the DM program in cardiology, our goal is that the student gets a basic level of proficiency in all of the essential domains of cardiology. In SCT, for example, it will include electrophysiology, maybe heart failure management, outpatient care, outpatient evaluation, echocardiography, imaging. So there will be exposure to all these areas. So there should be a certain basic level of skills that they should acquire in all of them. Now, if one of the usually it's the student then who comes up and displays a certain extra interest, acumen, and skill, and maybe some talent that will make them particularly specialized, well suited for a certain area. Once that is identified, one can gradually encourage the student to get involved more and more. The way I do it is that I start to ask them to write papers in that area, and watch them as they kind of get more and more involved into that process, and give them more and more responsibilities in a given area, but within the framework of what is feasible during the training process. And that's the way I do it. I'm sure there are other ways of doing it, but I haven't thought actually too deeply about it. It happens sort of organically. Um, Maybe we should ask Hari Krishnan what he thinks about this.
Yeah, I agree that giving right or giving topics and small case reports to start with as to write them and make them into a publishable format is one way to judge them and guide them, and then we can give short research projects that will help them. And also the interventional training also know to how to work up patients starting, for example, a TAVI program or something. That is one way to identify them, how they work up and how they start a program. We help in starting a program. That is one way to build up the way they build up the program. That is how to watch and guide them in a particular direction. That is one way to do.
So actually, we also have a PDF program, but I find that a lot of people are more interested in electrophysiology. Very few takers for pediatric cardiology. So I don't know, is it because of the teacher training, how
Yes,
to
that
change the
that has a
impactness of yeah.
no. It's both actually. It's the teachers and it's also the specialty. Sometimes there is a obviously Sri Chitra has a very strong EP program, perhaps the best in South India. And they do this tremendous range and variety of cases, and there's a lot of intellectual excitement within that field. So yes, that milieu must be there for that reason. So it depends to some extent on the specialty, but some teachers can be remarkably, like in the time when Dr. Tandon inspired us into pediatric cardiology, there was nothing really in pediatric cardiology. Patients were not doing well after surgery. There wasn't too much. Echo was just starting to develop. So again, personality of some teachers can have a real remarkable influence on the career choices of their students. That is true. That can also happen. But then you need some good career counseling. What you need to do is that you need to have a sit down with the student and determine, okay, you may be very excited and interested in this area, but you should also know about this particular field and what is it that you can actually end up accomplishing. So that sort of thing also needs to happen on the side.
Yeah, this also depends on what their job prospects or whatever is the future of the career. That also is pediatric cardiology. We know that it requires a very elaborate setup supported by a surgical team. So that may not be feasible to be implemented in all the areas in the country. That also may be one reason what you mentioned.
Yes.
I think we have few questions in the chat box. Dr. Divya, I think, can you share your best and worst experience as a teacher come mentor? Dr. Divya has asked this question.
Well, I can't be spot on in terms of exactly, I haven't thought exactly of any specific instance, but I have to say I've been proven wrong uh, by some of my students. So somebody at the start of their career, you would think that, oh my God, this person is really untrainable, really incapable of becoming a good cardiologist. It's not safe to our patient. And you sort of brand him or her as being somebody totally useless. And then over a period of time, that person works their way through and actually becomes really good at their job and proves you wrong. So that has happened. I think that has happened with me. So it's very important. The lesson that I learned was not to be judgmental too early. And my own mentor in Boston used to decide within a day or two whether you'll be a good catheterizer or not. And then if he decided that you are not, then you didn't receive any training. Now that approach was very drastic, I thought. And I sort of carried that approach initially, but I have realized I've been proven wrong completely. So I think the most important thing is to respect your student, and that's been the lesson I've had with most of my interactions.
Yeah, that's very wonderful answer, because most of the time we face the same issue, because if their expectations we don't meet, they just disregard the teachers. So we don't know whether we are thinking other side of the thing, that person is not really interested. I think that is a mutual way of understanding each other. Another question from KKG, very insightful and thought-provoking session. Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Krishna Kumar. Privileged to hear you today. What do you do when student-teacher relation breaks due to different wavelength on expectations by both sides, especially at the higher level of education?
It does happen, and then you have to reflect about it. So generally, when such a situation happens, we sit amongst ourselves as faculty, or we talk to a student with whom we have a more direct rapport. So, if, for example, I'm just giving you an example. We have a first year resident who just there is a complete breakdown of relationship, and there's a situation where the resident is really going to collapse in terms of has a mental breakdown or loses confidence in a very big way. If that happens, the way we deal with it is firstly discuss amongst ourselves, but more importantly, try and find one of the colleagues of the student and get some insights into why that could have happened, and then try and address it at as much as possible from the root cause, rather than being judgmental. The most important thing is not to label anybody, uh, but to understand the reasons behind a certain behavior or response. That is the only way. Of course, if there is repeated violations, then obviously that does happen sometimes, and then of course you have to take action at a different level. But in general, I think the way to do it is to try and understand as much as possible.
So you told we have to have a lot of yardstick to measure, or the measure of their teaching capacities, and for especially when you quoted about the BC Roy Award, and then we have to create a lot of awards for the best teachers. Do you think that will have any impact? Like we also have many awards actually, best clinician, best teachers, and all those things. Because I thought it could be a one-off instance rather. Like it depends upon how it's all depends upon the student, how he is very receptive to a particular teacher. So even though teacher is best, probably if we are not catering to his needs, especially in the modern day practice, the best teacher for me, I would think, is my resident will be the Google. So for not only for the patients, they Google search, even the resident search in the Google and get all this. Whatever we say, or we give them homework, they don't actually go and read the books. They actually give now with a lot of AI, precisely what you want, they keeps giving. So the impactness for the teaching has really, as you mentioned, is our role in the career development has almost gone, which I feel like in the future. So do you think it could have
No,
any?
I really don't agree with you in that sense. I think Google is unfiltered and it's very dangerous because of that. And we've seen that. So the discrimination, that is what needs to be taught today. Having run masterclass in cardiology for 3 years, we still realize that discriminatory capacity of a great clinician just stands out. Today you have a case discussion and Dr. Subramaniam comes online or Dr. Taragan comes online. You are awestruck at their judgment, their wisdom, and that wisdom just doesn't come through Google, whether you like it or not. So what I try to do with the masterclass is to really get to show the rest of the country that what kind of wisdom exists in such great teachers and how you can emulate that. And that can only be emulated through hard work, through years and years of dedicated care of patients with utter sincerity. Then you can actually have that discrimination, that wisdom. Now, that is something I absolutely refuse to believe can be learned from Google. Impossible. Today, in fact, more than ever before, it is more relevant because to teach discrimination is something that is very difficult but needs to be done. Otherwise, there is just a lot of wastage of resources. There is always a lot of thoughtless following of guidelines. We just remember a 1A, 2B, 3C without any thought applied to our Indian context, without any thought, without recognizing the patient's background. So there's so many aspects that need to be taught today. So I really don't think uh, any of what I've said would become irrelevant no matter what AI or anything you bring in.
Yeah, you are very well said. I also believe the same thing, but still, I'm finding difficult to convince my most of the residents. Second thing is one more question has come, Dr. Shivakumar sir, as you mentioned rightly, promotions are not based on purely teaching competency. Such teachers contribute to building legacy institutions. How to ensure this tribe is identified, rewarded, and retained?
So the way I found it works in Harvard is that, of course, they have a written form of your assessment, which is very structured, but they also have a grapevine, and they talk amongst each other a lot, and that is also given importance. So what everybody thinks of you, there is, you may think it's gossip, or it's not really very, but that is also very important, what you're thought of, what you're valued. And and finally a decision is taken through committees that look into not just the what has been written down on paper, but also what the most wisest people out there think about uh, this person. So that's how finally promotions are made, especially when it comes to leadership and it comes to selection. In fact, they go to an extreme degree even for the selection of their DM or equivalent or fellowship program. They go through that unwritten curriculum of finding out about the student. They have a very long interview process also. So really, I think we need to figure out a way to do that right. It's very difficult in India with the kind of busy lives that we exist, but great institutions should find a way to nurture greatest talent, retain their best teachers, and value them. I'm not saying giving them awards or rewards. Find a way to value them. They should feel valued and cherished and treasured, whichever way that works. It could be awards, it could be promotions, it could be recognitions, it could be not, it could be something else altogether. It could be something very subtle. But if you feel valued as a teacher, then definitely those institutions have a future.
Yeah, very well said, sir. I, so one more, Dr. Jayashree, thank you for the wonderful talk. Yes, we see the decline in the students' standards in all other scientific fields. I have witnessed PhD defense without even a single question from student community. So I don't know whether we are responsible for this deterioration. As you told that we should teach them how to discriminate. That is probably one of the reason that as a teacher we are still failing, or we are also whether partly responsible for the deterioration. That I am not sure about that. I think as we running out of time, final comments from you, sir, on this.
No, I think it's two ways. We cannot blame the students alone. All that's happening. It's within the society. It's the societal changes that are happening all around us that is probably responsible. We can't just say the students are getting worse, because the students there is an overall decline in teaching, or essentially that's what is happening. But what I have only suggested is that great institutions like Sri Chitra All India Institute need to just think about this much more seriously. If there is, for example, a situation of a great teacher who hasn't the necessary number of publications necessary for their promotions, that could be waived. I'm just giving you an example. Um, Somebody who's really important to the student community, who can really encourage and set an example. We just have to find a way of nurturing that person.
Thank you very much, sir. Well said. Your point should be put to across all these administrators for to do something about the future. I think any comments, Dr. Hari, Dr. Mala Ramanathan?
Nothing from my side. Thank you, KK, for that wonderful talk and the discussion just followed. Thank you.
Very much, Sir Krishna Kumar. On my own behalf and on behalf of my SCTI community, really very grateful to you for agreeing to deliver this lecture. And I asked you at short notice, and you were going to be traveling, and I asked you for a slight change of date, and you readily agreed and talked about this extremely relevant topic. I was a bit surprised, but I realized its phenomenal relevance because of the interactions that it generated, which moved it from a talk to something which we learned from so many people simultaneously. And thank you so much for responding so consciously and carefully that enabled understanding far more. It's very, very important because we do need inspiring teachers and mentors to show us the path we need to tread, and the students need to tread, and to tread where no one else has gone before, standing on others' shoes. So we take courage and inspiration, sir, and hope all of this seeps into the learning processes in different places where we go. The SAMVAAD lecture series was initiated at the behest of the director Sri Chitra, Professor Sanjay Bihari, and he remains a patron, supportive of all the endeavors here. Without his suggestions, we would not have benefited from the wide range of people that we have been able to bring to the SAMVAAD lecture. And we are very, very grateful to him. Behind the scenes, we have the computer division, Mrs. Geeta, Mr. Suresh Kumar B, and their whole team who have supported the SAMVAAD lecture series from its initiation. The Dean, Dr. Joseph, is here today because he is in Delhi with the NIRF rankings. And Dr. Ishwar are always my compatriots supporting the lecture series in their own ways. Dr. Manikandan, the Deputy Director, stepped into the breach when the Dean was unable to attend this session. He did so at short notice and took on this responsibility of presiding over the lecture. Thank you very much, sir, for stepping into this and rising to the occasion. So, last but not the least, this lecture series reaches out to an audience within and outside SCT-IMST, which will happen once our YouTube link is uploaded. And without this audience, our series would not be what it is. We are always energized by their engagement, both now and subsequently through the YouTube link. Thank you all, and I look forward to your continued support. Thank you, Professor Krishna Kumar, for bringing us such an enlightened and timely discussion on this. Thank you, sir, very much. Good evening, all of you, and Jai Hind.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, KK.
Thank you.
Can we leave?